Hi there, Graham Vincent, Violinmaker and musician. It's Friday and I said I'd do a Q&A on Fridays, so here we go. Actually, first of all, I haven't done a video for a few days, so I thought I'd just give you a quick update of where we are. I mean, basically, I've been beavering away in the workshop and the Spanish cedar violin is coming on nicely, as is the other one I've been working on at the moment. That's spoken for. This one is not. I'm quite excited about this. It's very responsive. It's hopefully in the next sort of 10 days we should be hearing what this one sounds like. So yeah, we'll see, won't we? Look forward to that. Yeah, so I mean that's basically what I've been up to, but I've printed out a load of questions that people have sent me. So let's start, shall we? Brennan 985 has sent in quite a few questions, and they're all good questions basically. So since you showed us adding purfling, it made me think a lot of questions here. Do you make your own purfling? No, I don't. Some time ago, when I started making violins, off eBay, bought this whole massive bundle of purfling, and I'm still using it up. Although I have to say we're getting down towards I think I've probably got enough for maybe another 3 or 4 violins. It's my intention to actually make my own after that stage. It served me very well for the first, well, it's probably going to see me through 50 violins, to be honest, that lot. Does purfling do anything structural or acoustic, or is it only a visual element everyone expects? Everyone certainly does expect it. A lot of very cheap violins, and also traditionally a lot of the sort of 18th century English violins just simply had purfling drawn on, inked on. Actually, let's go back to the starting point. Purfling is this line around the edge, which is traditionally 3 strips of veneer glued together, normally black, white, black. But those cheaper violins and the English violins don't generally suffer from any more cracks or splits coming from the edge of the soundboard or the back than violins with purfling do. Also, just things like you've got to be really careful when you put purfling across here that you don't actually cut that slot too deeply, because that connection between the button and the back is really important. There has to be a nice strong continuous piece of timber, because a lot of what's holding the neck in place is that button. So you don't want to sort of cut most of the way through that to put the purfling in. I mean, people say it stops cracks developing and splitting in. I'm not entirely sure if it does. I personally think it's just a really elegant visual addition, and I think people have come to expect it, and I think it's a chance for violin makers really to show their skills and their ability and show off a little bit, you know. So I kind of think it's there as a nice, elegant kind of decoration, and one that I find very appealing myself. So I wouldn't want to say it's not important, because even we're straying onto a whole different subject here. Even things that make you like the violin and make you feel better about it are important, because if you feel better about your violin, you'll pick it up more, you'll play it more. It's important. Have you made or seen any purfling that isn't a sandwich of dark, light, dark, like light, darker, darkest, or something else? Yes, I have, and funnily enough, this kind of preempts a little bit my thinking of I want to try a few things coming up in the near future, and one of them is I'm actually thinking of making a violin or several violins which just have pear wood as the purfling, and it would just be all one colour. Whether that's done as a couple of pieces of veneer to make bending in more easy, or whether I steam and use a bending iron and really bend a sort of quite a thick piece, I don't know yet, but I'm thinking just that solid line of colour might be quite nice. So that's yeah, you've preempted my thinking a little bit there. Have you ever cut the purfling channel too wide? And if so, what do you do? I have, and I think I do, or did in that instance, what many makers have done before, and that is use rather a bit more varnish in that area and some colouring and make it look like distressing, and it's hidden under a layer of darker finish there. So makeup, effectively, hide it. You asked the question, that's the honest answer. Do you find it more of a challenge adding purfling after the body is assembled, or is it about the same? Okay, that's a good question, because these violins that I'm working on at the moment, this is the first time, these two, that I've actually put the purfling in after the body's put together. We believe that Stradivarius and Guarneri, amongst others, did it that way. And the reason that we suspect that is because their locating pins are sometimes covered up by the purfling, or half covered by the purfling. So the pin was in, finished with, glued, and then the purfling was put in. And you don't finish moving those pins. They're still in use right up until the body is put together. So it shows that the purfling was then added later. What it enables you to do is really get the shape, get the overhang the way you want it, and then put the purfling in a nice regular distance from the edge. If you put the purfling in on the plates and then glue the thing together, you have kind of set the size of the plates and the dimension, the shape of the plates, and gives you little wriggle room to change that. This kind of introduces a bit of wriggle room doing it this way. So that's one of the advantages. So did I find it easier or harder? I found it harder to do, but there were certain advantages, and I think it's something I will do again. Whether, I'm not saying I will always do it that way, I don't know, but I'm certainly going to carry on exploring that, developing, hopefully getting better at doing it that way. So that's my intention. Right, okay. More from Brennan985. On another topic, do you only do scrolls? Have you ever made a scroll that wasn't a scroll, like a head, a star, or something? I don't know. Again, you seem to be preempting me here. I have got a commission, which I probably will be starting in the new year, which has a carving instead of a scroll. So I'm going to do one or possibly two side by side, which do have carved heads on. So watch this space, and hopefully that should be quite interesting. I'm certainly looking forward to it. I've done quite a lot of carving in the past, so yeah, I'm really looking forward to it, to be honest. So yeah, thank you for those questions. Brilliant. Right. Paul Anderson 6401 has asked, this I think relates specifically to the sharpening video that I did. What is the best way to hand sharpen in-canal gouge? I've struggled to find useful information on sharpening in-canal gouge. Cheers. Okay. I think I am going to do an addendum to the video on sharpening, because there are quite a few little bits and pieces, other questions that need to be answered. I didn't answer everything, didn't express myself completely as I wanted to. It's not a complete video, so I think another little bit, but it's some background information for anyone who's wondering what Paul Anderson is talking about. This is a standard gouge. I don't know how well that's going to show up, but the bevel is on the outside, and it's used for sort of carving, where you, as you run, you're sort of using the bevel to sort of direct the scoop, direct where it's moving. So that's the standard gouge. That's a good, useful kind of tool. Then we have a fundamentally different tool, which is a gouge with an inside bevel. Now this, in violin making, for example, you use this for putting the shape on the blocks before you put the ribs onto them. So this is effectively a gouge that is a paring chisel. We're jumping around again in subjects, sorry. That's a normal chisel. This is a paring chisel. It's a lot longer, and generally they are more lightly built than a comparable chisel of the same size, because they're not for forcing, they're not for pushing against too much, they're not for, you would never ever use a mallet on a paring chisel, for example. They are for flattening things. So this flat needs to be absolutely flat, and so you can lay it against the surface and just use to trim things down. Much in the same way, I just happen to have it in front of me. I can't remember the name of this particular type of Japanese saw, but it's the one where you've got a special blade which has no kerf projecting beyond one side. So it's a flush cutting saw, and it's even got this side up marked on the blade. So paring chisels, these saws, and also this sort of gouge are used for that same thing, which is producing a flat, or the simple curve in this case, surface. So yeah, I will do a video which shows, picks up the extra little bits and pieces I didn't cover in the sharpening video, and how to sharpen one of these is certainly going to be part of that. Or maybe I should just do a video about paring chisels and gouges. Yeah, we'll see how it goes, but certainly I will answer your question more comprehensively than I have here, because I haven't answered it at all, have I? Okay, sorry. TJ Woodworking. Yeah, quick suggestion about lighting. Notice some intense reflection off your glasses. Yeah, there were. So I've got a more expensive pair of glasses that I normally wear, which are sort of have a anti-reflective coating on, so you can actually see me. And also, I'm not in the same place, so I don't have a window behind the camera. Yeah. Okay, yep. Too right. Okay, but we have a question. Have you ever tried purfling with a metal like copper? No, I haven't. And because my mind wanders widely and aimlessly, as it sounds like yours does as well, it is something I've considered. But I kind of thought about it and then decided it was a bad idea, and there's a very specific reason for it. One of the reasons that violins survive so long is everything is so thin and light, and everything is able to move. So during the year, during the day, with humidity changes, with temperature changes, these things change shape, they change size. One of the reasons that your sound post needs adjusting sometimes, because it's behaving differently in the summer and the winter, is because these plates shrink, and you can imagine as they shrink, they pull what tends to happen, because the arch, if that shrinks, it doesn't pull the sides in so much, but it flattens down a little bit. That's part of the story. But also they do actually sort of change dimension overall. I mean, wood changes shape across the grain, changes dimension across the grain far more than it changes along the grain, but nevertheless it does change a little bit along the grain. So if you put something which is as unforgiving as metal in actually sort of in a channel in that plate, I think you're going to have problems with it either causing cracking or it actually sort of rucking up like a railway line in the heat. You may have seen some of that filigree work, inlay filigree work in old antiques, which has actually rucked up for that very reason. So I kind of thought, no, I wouldn't do that because of that. I often work with integrated copper or aluminium in my woodworking projects. It would be interesting to sort of see if it's something you've suffered from, or if I don't know how you use it. It could be that you use smaller pieces, which obviously the effect wouldn't be as great as a long thin piece running around the edge of something. Yeah, I think it would add a unique touch to a violin. It would, but like I say, it's something I think is going to cause too many problems. Ever thought about setting up a Discord group? It could be an excellent space for your community to share their projects and engage in live discussions. I've thought about these things, but I mean, in rather like the way that I choose to sort of do the minimal amount of editing I possibly can with these videos. I mean, I'm hoping the plan is with this video is I press record 15 minutes ago, I'm waffling, and I will just leave it going all the way through. I mean, if there's a lot of ums and ahs, I might cut out one or two, but the only way I can make this work really is that I just make it less work for me. So yeah, it's a thought, but I mean, I'm not earning anything as such from these videos, so I have to remember how I earn my living, and that's making violins, and I have to allow myself the maximum amount of time to get on with that, really. So interested in your thoughts on finger planes and their flattening process. Yeah, I mean, like I said, I think I answered this just as a written answer on the finger plane video. I've never bothered to flatten off the bottom of finger planes because unlike, I mean, if something like this plane, the bottom absolutely has to be completely flat because this plane is used for making joints which will go together, you know, so that has to be perfect, you know. Whereas you'd never choose to use a little finger plane to produce a jointing surface. Even if you're trying to do something that's flat, it's only nominally flat. So as long as there isn't something fundamentally wrong with the bottom of the plane, like a manufacturing error which would show up, then I think because of the nature of their purpose, I don't think they need to be that flat, really. Like I said, for me, the most important thing about violin making sort of finger planes is getting the geometry of the sharpening right, so that they're not riding along on the bevel rather than the actual cutting tip, and also just making sure they're razor sharp. So yeah, I hope that answers that one. JT Woodworking. Oh no, sorry. Yep, that was that one. Okay, I've got 3 pages. We've finished the first page. And there's only one question on the 3rd page. So, user SL7DJ2FF1N. I think that looks like a YouTube generated name if I've ever seen one. Greetings from southern Chile. Wow. Particularly interested in your use of non-traditional timbers. I'd like to know if you've used timbers other than spruce for the top plate and how the results have been. I've seen you making a couple with Spanish cedar top plates, which is a very different grain to the traditional spruce, but can't wait to hear how they sound. Yeah, me too. Right, so yeah, always it's a choice on the front. It's a choice of how does it look? Is it ringy? Does it feel stiff? Does it feel like it's got a good structure? Does it look like it's got problems that will cause, you know, it to split in the future? So those things are more important to me really than whether it's spruce or not. Bear with me 1 second. And that is a bit I probably will edit. One wood I have used with great success several times on the fronts of instruments is Western white pine, Pinus monticola. This is something that was used extensively in cabinet making in England during the late Victorian period, when tons and tons of it were sort of imported from North America, and it is how well that's going to sound there, but basically it's got all those properties I've described. It's light, it looks good, it's got an even grain, it doesn't generally have many faults, but you can see them very easily. And I've made 6 or 7 violins so far using this material, and they have all been great, to be honest. I mean, really lovely violins. So I think it just goes down to choosing something based on its properties rather than based on a name or tradition, I think, really. Or if you want to. I mean, if you're selling to a traditional market who aren't interested in anything else, then fair enough, go down the traditional route. Then this is the Spanish cedar one. I mean, it's lively. It's a light violin. I think that's going to sound great. I'm looking forward to hear that one. Yeah. Other questions? Do you make your own tail pieces and chin rest? Not yet. Again, this is something that it's on my radar to do. It's up to this point, I generally use fairly easily available. I mean, in terms of the amount of work that you need to do to make a tailpiece, there are some really nice ones available for very little money. So up to this point, that's been the reason that I've just opted for just buying them in. But I'm now getting to the point where I really want to make my own, and I think it's becoming more important for the sort of as my violins kind of reach a sort of, how can I put it? People seem to expect more and more of my violins, and I'm entirely happy about that, and that's the way it should be. And partly as an answer to that, I need to do things like make my own fittings and so on. So yes, I will be. No, I haven't yet so far. If so, what timber do you choose and why? Well, it's my intention to be turning my own tuning pegs, and I will be using English boxwood. I will probably use the same for the tailpiece and the well, all the fittings, if I can get it. Otherwise, I'll probably choose to substitute for 1 or 2 other woods, but English boxwood would be the absolute top of the pile, and that's what I'm intending to use. Yeah, so that's all those. Yeah, okay, right. Jack Bombig 4958. From a guitar repair guy, I struggle with touch-ups on lacquer damage, either pickwear or small accidents. I find it hard to determine what lacquer is on an instrument to begin, and I'm unsure what exactly to do to get a good result. Violin makers handle this all the time. Can you share any knowledge? Then this question about glue. Let's talk about that first of all. Do you know what? I don't know how much help I'm going to be on this one. Here's a nicely finished violin. It's a French violin. We, as violinists, in some ways, violin makers, pardon me, in some ways we have it quite easy, because the sort of level of finish we expect is completely different from that on a modern guitar. Yeah, it wants to be flat, smooth and lovely, but it rare. I mean, you do see some violins which are sort of sprayed with a lacquer and polished so they're like mirrors, but most are not. Most have a sort of, once you get away from factory made violins, they have a hand done finish, and that inevitably has a little bit of variation. And the other thing about violins compared with guitars is the because of the shape, they actually sort of cover up a range of colours very easily, just because of the shape of the thing itself. There's a not terribly good repair on this, which is one of the reasons why I'm holding it up. I don't know if you can see it. I mean, it's basically most of this corner here was replaced. It's not terribly well done. The colour's all right, but looking at that, I know that if a repair of that okay standard had been done on a guitar, it would stand out like a sore thumb, because I mean, basically a guitar, the front and back plate is like this big, flat, plain, homogeneous surface. So again, I think they're quite different approaches to refinishing. Also, I mean, once you get into a quality kind of instrument on the violin front, you're dealing with shellac or an oil finish, both of which are fairly easy to maintain. Whereas when I say maintain, I mean repair, maintain. Whereas with a guitar, you're talking about generally nowadays a factory finished lacquer, and although it's much harder and it won't damage as easily as a violin finish, when it does, it's harder to deal with. So yeah, I'm really, I mean, I have done one or two little guitar repairs myself, and I mean, one of the things that I've seen used, which I've used myself quite successfully, was actually super glue, just to patch up tiny little sort of dings and what have you. But when it comes to colour and so on, no, I think with the guitar you probably do better, in all honesty, to be thinking about refinishing sometimes. That's my pennyworth from a Violinmaker, so I take that with a huge pinch of salt. Right. Normally I use tight bond and have got nice results when experimenting with hide glue. Can you talk about glues and how to learn to use it correctly? Glue, hide glue. I am going to do a video on that specifically, because I mean, hide glue is a wonderful thing. It's got many advantages. Disadvantage is it's an animal product, so you got to get your head around whether that's acceptable or not. In all other respects, it's kind of one of the best glues, really. It's quite fragile, so that means if I drop this violin, which I'm not going to do, there's a good chance that it'll be a joint that breaks, and that protects the wood. It's not only that, but it's one of the glues, and there aren't many, that will stick to itself very easily, which means that once you've dropped it and the joint has popped open, it's quite easy to re-glue it. So it's got other advantages, like it's one of the glues which will close a joint on its own. It actually dries away to very little and pulls the joint with it. That's why for example, when I do rub joints on the front and back plates, I don't cramp them up. I don't cramp them up at all. I generally don't cramp neck joints. If I know it's a good joint, I don't need to. But anyway, that's I think something for another video. Yeah, so good questions. Thank you for that. Right, Niels Field Herping 7340. Hi Graham, Neil here from the southern tip of Africa. Do you aim for a specific weight on your violins, and how do you achieve this using different types of wood? Right, good question. My thinking on the weights of violin is the lighter the better, but obviously that's not the whole story. This particular violin is going to be about 420 grams when it's finished, which puts it about average for a Stradivarius. This one is going to be a little bit less, which puts it down in Del Jesu kind of territory. I don't aim for a specific weight. I aim for a feel for the plates, a response, and that's what guides it. I'm pleased when it's light. I worry when it's not. But, you know, if it's the same weight as the Stradivarius, then I'm not overly worried. They seem to work fairly well. Do you make your own purfling? No, I think we've covered that. Nope. Right. Question from Kick His Ass Seabass, or Kick His Ass Seabass, 318. Hi, Graham. I've nearly finished my first violin from the Graham Vincent plans. Whoa, that's fantastic. I haven't much clue on varnish. Can you tell me, can you tell the difference of a varnish violin compared to some other finish or non-finish, and how much of it is tradition and aesthetics, as the maple needs some colour? On my guitars, I use epoxy for primer, then a few coats of true oil. So thinking of trying that for my violin. I'm also using a non-traditional darker woods. Your thoughts would be most appreciated. Cheers. Right, okay. Several things going on here. First of all, I'll try and keep this short. There's something called chatoyance, or chatoyance, which is the sort of reflective nature of wood. Now I've got to try and make this work here. Let me see. What I'm hoping you can see is that the light and dark bits aren't the same bits. They move as you move the instrument, okay? You're trying to preserve that with violin making. With certain types of guitar making, you're not bothered by it. For example, Paul Reed Smith used a lot of very heavily flamed fronts on some of the electrics, and they stain them quite heavily. And so you lose that chatoyance. It becomes, you know, the actual ripple, the figure is really pronounced, but you don't get that exciting, that lovely kind of that movement with it. And the same thing's happened here on the neck, for example, where over the years, this has got pretty dirty. And, you know, the dark bits stay in the same place because a lot of that color is just simply grot that's soaked into the grain in that particular place. And that's what stain does on a figured maple if you saturate it with a heavy stain. So the stains that people choose to use on violins are normally, they're carefully chosen. Things like tea work really well because tea doesn't sit more in one grain than the rest. It uniformly takes the color down, so that you don't lose that movement, that chatoyance. You know, this is disappointing. I can't. Oh, there. I think you can see it there. Can you see the sort of the movement? Anyway, so what you're trying to do with violin finish is you're trying to perhaps give a little bit of color and then seal over that with a finish that stops any subsequent and more coloured layers soaking in, so you don't lose that sort of movement, that chatoyance. So traditionally, yeah, you might do something like staining it with tea. You would certainly expose the instrument in the white to lots of UV, or leave it hanging in the sun so that that brilliant white colour sort of goes down to sort of more of a biscuity colour. And then you give a fairly light coat of a ground which seals the surface. And I mean, let's not go into all the different types of ground that you can use, but there are plenty of them. I mean, some people literally just use, I mean, I've seen people successfully use Danish oil as a ground. I've seen them use thin down varnishes. I've seen egg white with borax used, all sorts. And then you get into the varnishing over the top. So, do you know, this is probably a subject for another video, isn't it? But I'm trying to answer this question in a reasonably detailed way in a fairly short time. If you go down the route of finishing a violin in the same way that you finish a guitar, you're going to have a very specific look, and it's going to be more, it's never going to sit comfortably with old traditional instruments. But not that, I'm not saying that's a bad thing. I'm just saying it will have that specific look. If you're looking for a more traditional finish, then you need to give a very light color to the instrument by sunlight, by UV, by some tea, and then seal the surface with something that stops subsequent coats of varnish sinking in. Then use, whether it's a spirit varnish, whether it's an oil varnish, your more heavily coloured varnish. That's how violin makers do it, and that's why, I mean, this is slightly difficult to see because this is, 120 years old, so the neck itself is quite grubby, but you can see here all the colour is in the varnish. It's not in the stain in the timber. Okay, so hope that helps. I don't feel like I've really answered your question terribly satisfactorily. I think another video is called for there, definitely. Poppy K1431. What vibrating string length do you make for your violins? That's such a good question. Bear with me 1 minute. So, what I've done is I've just grabbed my book where I write everything down, because I've written down quite a few bits and pieces about this. Yeah. I mean, the simple answer to that is 320. No, it's not. Where are we? Yeah, 328 is what I choose. Why is what I'm trying to answer. I think a lot of classical players, European players, choose maybe a fraction longer. Well, it's not really the players, it's the makers, should I say, choose a fraction longer than that. I think some of the Japanese ones particularly choose a length which is slightly less. I chose 328 because it sat fairly well in amongst all of the variation of string lengths, and because to me it was a length that seemed about right. So that's kind of that's the answer to that. That's 328 because it felt about right. Yeah. What else is there to say about that? I mean, it's funny on the violin. I mean, these things are quite prescribed. If you get onto the viola, for example, then it's a much more open field. There's a lot of variation in string lengths on viola, which there isn't on violins. Anyway, gosh, that's nearly 38 minutes. I think we'll wrap it up there. I'm not going to bother to edit any of this. Hopefully you'll find it enjoyable. I will be doing, obviously, another question and answer next week. So please like and subscribe, obviously, if you haven't already. Do leave any questions that you have for me, any comments on this video, and then I'll refer to this for next week's Q&A. Okay, that's great. And yeah, see you all soon. Look after yourselves, folks. Cheers. Bye.